I would like to extend a warm welcome to all members of the Planning Committee, officers and members of the public in attendance at today's meeting. I'm Councillor Christine Ward, Chairman of the Planning Committee. I would now like to hand over to Democratic Services for the housekeeping rules.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website via YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. I would remind those in attendance to please use your microphone when speaking and remember to switch it off once you have finished speaking. Please also switch any mobiles, laptops or other devices to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. If the fire alarms ring, please can everyone leave the room immediately and go via the nearest fire exit, but do not use the lifts. Please go to the fire assembly point, which is located at the bottom of the car park by the garages. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies?
We have received apologies from Councillor Malcolm Wade.
Thank you very much. Members, can I get you to agree the minutes held on the 11th of June as a correct record? Thank you. Declarations of interest, are there any? Councillor Davies?
Just ward member for Pennington, but I've had no input on the Town Council decision or any others.
Councillor Rickman.
Thank you, Chairman. Application 25/10444. The company whose application that is are doing some work on my house at the moment, so I will, to avoid any misunderstanding, I will leave the meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now continue with the first application. This is land east of Lower Pennington Lane, Pennington, and the application is 24/10401, and you'll find this on page 5 of the agenda. We do have speakers. We have Mr. Simon Truick. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Andrew Ride, you will share the time you have. Mr. Simon Potts, you will have 3 minutes. Councillor Jackie England, you will have 3 minutes. Before we start the presentation, we have several committee updates on this application, which you should have in front of you. Okay, we'll now commence then with the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. SS6, land to the east of Lower Pennington Lane. Found an application for the erection of 30 dwellings, submitted as a hybrid application, proposing 26 of those dwellings in full, with all supporting plans for access roads, open space designs and site layouts, and 4 plots for self-built dwellings as outline planning for outline planning permission, with access to the plots the only matter under consideration at this time. Here you can see the red line plan showing the full extent of the application site, including land at Oakhaven Hospice, to provide access to parking spaces being provided by the planning application. The aerial photo indicating the existing agricultural landscape along Lower Pennington Lane, and the built form to the south, the extent of built form at Oakhaven Hospice and the existing nursery to the south of the application site. And clearly the residential areas that surround the site on the edge of Pennington and Lymington are present. So turning to the site context, the light green area here to the south of the site is the southwest Hampshire greenbelt. So the application site was removed from the greenbelt when it was allocated for development by your local plan in 2020. But the boundary of the greenbelt still butts up to the application site and does include the Oakhaven Hospice, as you can see on the plan. The yellowy colour here to the very south is the National Park. You're obviously familiar with the boundary of the National Park and the District Council abutting one another. Well, that's where the National Park is in context of our application site. The thick black line is the built-up area of Lymington and Pennington, obviously capturing all the existing built-form residential areas to the west. but excluding the hospice, and obviously the national park is outside the built-up area. The green areas, the round circles, and this large area extending around the edge of the application site are the TPOs on and near the site. So you can see quite an extensive number of TPOs in the area, included on the application site. The pink line running around the edge of the existing residential properties and crossing the site and extending to the south is the public right-of-way that crosses the application site and goes beyond to land to the south. We've got public open space, Woodlands Gardens, small green squares or coloured buildings are listed buildings. So there's one at the junction with Fox Pond Lane, and then some to the northwest, close to the application site. And then the thick blue line in the northwest corner of the plan being the local shopping frontage, the retail and commercial premises on Milford Road. And the entire site, along with the land to the east of it, is allocated for development. I haven't included the layer of that from the GIS system, simply because it would obliterate all the other layers that I've included, but you'll be familiar with that in any event. Turning to that specifically, the site is allocated for mixed-use residential-led development by local plan policy SS6. Our application site today, outlined in red on the northwest corner of the larger site, is approximately 1/3 of the wider land allocated for at least 100 homes, as I described, covering the land to the east towards Ridgeway Lane. You will, of course, be aware that this committee considered an outline application for up to 82 dwellings on the remaining land within the allocation at its meeting in April, concluding that that scheme was unacceptable and refusing it. The illustrative concept master plan gives an indication of broadly how development and supporting open space could be laid out, including, in this case, buffers and provision of parking for Oakhaven Hospice. So the sort of salmon brown colours are areas considered to be appropriate for development, residential development. The darker green, potential open space. The lighter green, the supporting ANRG, alternative natural recreational green space. Highlights the existing trees that the concept master plan considers should be retained, and gives some ideas of where the accesses should or could be taken from. And then this orangey colour that abuts the boundary with Oakhaven Hospice is the area considered appropriate to provide parking and the buffer between that site and the development that is considered to be important as part of this allocation. Moving on to some site photos. Here we have Lower Pennington Lane and the access to the existing residential property on the site. That form is shared with the public right-of-way, and that's the point at which the public right-of-way meets Lower Pennington Lane. Photo of the existing bungalow on site, looking in a northerly direction towards it, and that bungalow will be demolished to facilitate the development. That's not considered to be significant or a problem, given its basic nature. You see some of the trees overhanging the site, dominant, mature trees, a significant feature of the landscape and the character of the site. Coming to the middle of the site, this is the route, or the worn path, the desire line that pedestrians have formed, worn on the site in crossing it. Whilst not following the defined route of the public right-of-way, it's clearly a desire line that crosses corner to corner across the field on the eastern part of the application site. There again you can see trees in the background and the nature of the existing agricultural use of the site. And then looking along that worn path in the opposite direction, so in a northerly, northwesterly direction, and the houses that are abutting the site to the north. More photos of the trees and the landscape setting around the edges of the site. You can get a sense there of just how big they are, how significant they are as landscape features, dominant they are on the skyline, and what an important feature they are. There on the photo on the right, you can see them in the context of the existing bungalow to get a sense of the scale and height of them. More photos of the trees down the centre of the site. These are cars that are being parked on the site by users, visitors of the Oakhaven Hospice under agreement from the landowner. And then looking across the eastern side, eastern portion of the application site in a southerly direction, the building you can just make out in the distance is part of the nursery to the south of the site. So turning to the proposed scheme, we have 26 dwellings proposed as part of the full application. 11 of those are market detached homes. 15, which is 50%, are affordable homes. And then 4 self-built dwellings outlined in blue on the north corner of the application site. Access is from Lower Pennington Lane, close to the existing access you just saw in the photos. Scheme introduces an estate road running through the site to serve the self-built properties, and then to serve the rest of the properties in a southerly direction to the variety of detached houses laid out as you can see. Important feature is retention of the trees down the centre of the site and round the edges, especially along the southern boundary and Lower Pennington Lane. As you saw from those photos, they are significant landscape features, so it's a positive aspect of the scheme that they're being retained. The public right-of-way is proposed to be diverted to run through the open space through the centre of the site, exiting at the south, where it will adjoin the existing public right-of-way that crosses the remaining land within SS6. Or ultimately, if that scheme proposes to divert and reroute the public right-of-way, it could rejoin at a more convenient, attractive position where it makes use of the open space landscape setting that's being delivered by this scheme and potentially the scheme to the south. You can see there the size of the plots, the nature of the detached houses, characteristic of the area, and consistent with the prevailing pattern. We do have larger buildings to the south accommodating the flats that are included in the scheme. Those larger buildings can take context from the larger buildings on Oakhaven Hospice immediately to the south. And then I referred to the provision of parking spaces for Oakhaven Hospice. They will be located on the very southern edge, where they adjoin the access road serving Oakhaven Hospice for direct access by those visitors, staff that attend that site and need use of the parking. So comparing the planning application with the illustrative concept master plan, there are clear consistencies: retention of the existing landscape edges, broad position of the built form, and the position of the ANRG. So I remind you that the brown salmon colour is the built form proposed, landscape edge, ANRG coming in from the south as proposed on the application scheme. So in doing so, it is considered that there is no conflict with the overall policy strategy, or does this scheme compromise or sterilise development of the remaining land within the policy allocation. Turning to the context, the site falls within the built-up area of Lymington and Pennington. The local distinctiveness SPD identifies the character of the lanes consists of pockets of infill development behind low-density housing fronting Lower Pennington Lane. These pockets display consistent form, layout and appearance with higher density than the houses fronting the lane. This development, under consideration today, is considered to reflect and respect the pattern of infill developments characterising the area. Now, whilst density can provide a mathematical way of comparing schemes, it doesn't reflect the fine-grained character and appearance of a scheme. As highlighted in the case officer report, this application has a density of circa 14.5 dwellings per hectare, comparable with circa 14.8 for the proposals on the adjoining site. However, the layout and arrangement of the scheme is considered to respect the prevailing pattern and character of the area. The flats to the south of the site provide a pocket of higher density that increases the overall scheme density, but is considered to take advantage of the larger scale buildings at Oakhaven Hospice. You can see from the GIS, the Ordnance Survey style plan here that I've put on the screen, you've got areas like Forest Gate Gardens, Lee Lands, and others, even along Fox Pond Lane. You can see quite a different character to that along Lower Pennington Lane, and that's picked up in the local distinctiveness SPD, and it's that this scheme builds on and responds to in terms of its layout and character and why it's considered appropriate to the context. Now turning to the elevations, design of the buildings, some attractive buildings with detailing, interest, articulation and richness in their appearance to contribute positively to the character of the area. In addition to the appearance of the houses is their layout, siting and opportunity for landscape setting and boundaries. The proposed layout of parking also contributes to the rural landscape-led character of the site. No wall-to-wall hard surface between flank elevations and opportunities for landscape to enclose and screen vehicles in street scenes. So here you can see boundary hedges, enclosing plot boundaries and residential curtilages, frontage gardens, space to separate, as I said, described flank walls from parking areas on adjoining plots, avoiding some of the more urban design traits that we see on higher density schemes. Bringing that to life a little bit with a CGI image, looking across at the residential properties across some of the open space, you can get a clear sense there from the style and type of place that the applicant is trying to create. Moving on to the flats, the bigger buildings, we have one providing 3 two-bedroom flats with undercroft parking for those flats and stores for bins and bikes behind those undercroft parking spaces. The larger building provides 10 one-bedroom flats and also includes a bin store accessible, readily accessible for collection purposes, and a bike store behind to serve the needs of the occupants. You get a sense there of more barn-like rural design features, but maintaining consistency and design features from the houses and across both the buildings with those projecting bay windows and general style and material use. Parking is more intense, inevitably for a slightly higher dense scheme that incorporates more properties, but clustered and at the end of the estate road. Still has landscape enclosure and separation to the buildings, and also accommodates turning and access with the provision of access directly to those doors for the bin store that you saw on the elevations. The photo shows where the parking spaces for Oakhaven Hospice will be provided and the element of additional driveway access that is provided to service them. Accessible from their existing access drive, these will provide for the parking needs of the hospice and accord with site-specific consideration 3C of the local plan policy SS6. What's not visible in this photo, but you can just about make out on the plan here, is that there are already some parking spaces accessed from that access drive. So in terms of that dense area of landscape that abuts the driveway at present, there is already parking alongside that driveway in terms of the context and character that the change that will occur to deliver those parking spaces. It's already a feature of that driveway. Another CGI showing how those flats will appear in their context and the landscape setting around the parking area and separation to the building. A slight twist bend in the footprint of that building to reduce the scale of it and bulk, and ultimately this southern part of the building wouldn't be as readily visible when looking down the estate road, as it's cranked away and a bit obscured by this forward projection. Turning to the access element of the proposals, the position of the new vehicular access into the site broadly be here in this location. This is the existing access, so there's already a break in the landscape frontage to Lower Pennington Lane. So the loss of landscape is minimal, and ultimately this landscape that you can see on the edge of the photo is what's sprung up as a result of removal of some trees under a tree work application a few years ago. Those trees were allowed to be removed because of their poor state and potential threat to the highway safety. That space still affords opportunity for replacement tree planting to maintain the landscape edge to Lower Pennington Lane, but in a manner that would preserve highway safety by allowing sufficient visibility displays for the access that's proposed. So the outline application, as I described, is for the 4 self-build plots outlined in blue there, and the sole matter under consideration for them at this time is the access. We'll of course share that vehicular access from Lower Pennington Lane, and the access road that serves them is entirely appropriate to the 4 properties that will be brought forward on that site. And now looking at the public right-of-way that crosses the site and the proposals for diverting that. So the pink line, as I described earlier, is the defined line adopted by Hampshire County Council as the route of the public right-of-way. You can see a dotted line crossing the field corner to corner, which is what this photo is indicating. I believe that was the route of the footpath in the past. It was moved to the edge of the field, perhaps to facilitate use of the field by the farmer. I don't know the full details, but ultimately the planning application seeks to return it to a more central position which reflects the desire line that's been worn across the field, and will place it in the public open space ANRG landscape setting that the scheme will provide. So you can see how it would hug the northern boundary as existing, cross the access road, and then run through the centre of the site before exiting at an appropriate point on the southern boundary. That would be subject to the diversion order and a condition that allows flexibility in respect of what and where any revisions to the public right-of-way across the adjoining land has either been agreed or proposed, in order that we get consistency and continuity of the route. It's considered this is an appropriate change to the route of the public right-of-way. Its current route would take it behind these plots and around the boundary at the edge of the site. Clearly that isn't the desire line, as is evident from the site, and equally that would place it in a much more secluded, unattractive position where users wouldn't get that clear line of sight as to where they're going, and ultimately there'd be a 90-degree right angle bend hidden behind hedgerows and boundary treatments, so not a particularly attractive route for users in any event, especially compared to what is being proposed by this application. Based on the proposed scheme layout, this is considered to be a significant improvement and clearly reflects the preference of users. That will be subject to a diversion order that this council can consider should the planning application be supported. With the benefit of this planning application behind it, should be supported. That order should be supported through that process. Turning to off-site highway works. In order to make provision for the safety of pedestrians and to encourage walking to the local centre on Milford Road and schools in Pennington, Hampshire County Council highways officers require provision of a footway along Lower Pennington Lane. These works can be adequately accommodated within the adopted highway and for much of its length within the existing carriageway, thereby retaining the principal landscape features, setting and character of Lower Pennington Lane. Whilst this does have an urbanising impact, its impact is very low. The local distinctiveness SPD highlights the importance of the trees and hedgerow boundary frontage to the road, and the separation to the road, the ditch and the grass verge. Well, none of those principal features will be significantly affected by these proposals, so it's considered that they will sit acceptably within those distinctive features, albeit slightly changing the character and the edge of the carriageway where it does abut the grass verge. The benefits of providing for pedestrians is considered to be a significant improvement. Landscape framework, a comprehensive landscape framework to deliver an attractive place, retaining the mature dominant trees through the centre of the site and around the edges, especially along the edge of Lower Pennington Lane and the buffer to Oak Haven Hospice at the south of the site. Public open space in ANRG. Sufficient quantity of alternative natural recreation green spaces provided for the proposed housing mix. The adopted strategy for ANRG requires provision of main spaces. In this instance, a 60-metre diameter space is required. Concerns have been raised by the Council's environmental design team regarding the provision of such a space. There are concerns that the 60 metres can't be laid out and without impediment by the edge of the site or other built form. The circle on the right-hand image indicates the extent to which such a space would overlap the edge of the site and the self-build plots. So that area there, and in terms of overlapping the boundary, it's that section there. This is not considered to compromise the quality of the space, which in any event extends significantly to the east with this additional area in order to make up the amount of area required as ANRG. You can see the full extent of it there, spreading throughout the site and creating that landscape setting for the development. There is a lack of informal public open space compared to the policy CS7 calculator. Whilst that counts against the scheme, due to the retained landscape setting, gardens and spacious layout, as well as the ANRG and public right-of-way heading off-site to other open spaces, it is considered that the informal recreation needs of residents are not compromised. So this is about half the amount of informal public open space that the scheme requires based on the calculator that works with the CS7 policy. However, we do have landscape setting and other areas across the site, and as I described, spacious layout and large gardens that will contribute to the amenity and recreation needs of residents. I should point out, of course, we've got the children's play area provided for on site. You'll see from the case officer report a condition seeking provision of details of the play equipment to be installed there. There's a thought process around providing for a certain age group on this site and then other age groups on the adjoining application site, subject to any appeal decision and or future application, of course. So the condition gives us flexibility to review what age range the equipment would be designed for based on the circumstances of any other application on the adjoining land at that time. But sufficient space ultimately is provided for by the highlighted area. Turning to affordable housing, as I described, the scheme proposes to deliver a policy compliant 50%, which is 15 units, as affordable housing. An appropriate split between the shared ownership, social and affordable rental tenures has been provided. Whilst the affordable dwellings are all 1- and 2-bed units, this was encouraged by officers as part of the package of affordable housing provision across the entire allocation. So the application on the adjoining land made provision for the 3- and 4-bedroom units as well as some 2-bedrooms, and this application scheme was encouraged to support and provide the smaller units. Now, our evidence suggests that there is greater affordable housing need at smaller size units in any event, so it's considered that there was no need to revise the size mix as a result of the decision to refuse the adjoining application. However, the applicant has proposed an age limit of over 55 years for this affordable housing. Your NFDC housing officer does not support this restriction. However, there is clear demand for affordable housing across the district and Lymington from residents over the age of 55. Evidence and information that is collated and stored by our affordable housing team and has been provided to us as part of consideration of this part of the proposal. And when you review this suggested restriction against the local plan policy HOU2, there is no conflict identified to justify resisting this aspect of the proposal. However, it is considered prudent to allow for younger occupants if the 15 units aren't occupied by over 55s within a reasonable time frame. So a cascade provision would be built into the the Section 106 agreement to allow under 55s to occupy these units, these dwellings, these flats, should they not all be taken up by residents over the age of 55. That's considered to be a reasonable compromise that reflects the aspirations of the applicant, but also ensuring that best use is made of the facility, the provision of the affordable housing. I've described and referred to self-build properties. The planning application includes the provision of 4 plots to be provided as self-build or custom-build plots, seen as a way of making service plots available to people wishing to build their own home. The 4 plots will require reserved matters applications for their appearance, landscape layout and scale. The coloured plan allows these to be made and implemented individually from each other. And these plans do set upper limits on the floor area and height that those self-built properties could be built to. So what I'm trying to describe there is normally you would restrict any development until reserved matters applications have been agreed. Well, in this instance, of course, you'd get individual self-builders purchasing plots and looking to do their individual house, and it's unreasonable, of course, to preclude them from doing so until details of all 4 plots have been agreed. So the phasing plan and conditions have been designed around allowing each one to come forward individually with its specific details. Each one will have to adhere to the maximum floor area and height, but there's a degree of freedom to design and size and lay them out in a manner that the self-builder wishes. We are required to maintain a register of people who are interested to build their own homes, and these will be made available to those people who've registered in the first instance. So, in conclusion, the application proposes to deliver 30 dwellings on this site allocated for residential development in the built-up area. It provides a mix of house size and tenure, including self-build plots, that will contribute positively to the housing needs of the district, including the 50% affordable housing. It accords with the site-specific considerations of Policy SS6 there listed. It preserves highway safety, residential amenity, protects and enhances ecological features, including mature trees. It will be an attractive, spacious, well-landscaped scheme that will enhance the character of the area and be a pleasant place to live. The shortfall of informal open space and minor urbanising impact on the character and appearance of Lower Pennington Lane are not considered to render the scheme unacceptable in its totality or outweigh the benefits of the scheme as set out in the report. The Council cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of land for housing. Therefore, efficient use of developable land should be made, and the adverse impacts of the development would not significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits, especially having regard to directing development to sustainable locations, making effective use of land, securing well-designed places, and providing affordable homes. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to completion of a Section 106, the conditions set out in the report, and your update sheet. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive report. We'll now come to the speakers. So first of all, we'll go to Mr. Simon Trigg. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, to confirm, my name is Simon Truick. I'm Director of Planning at Intelligent Land, representing the applicant. This proposal brings forward a thoughtfully designed scheme that will deliver 30 new homes within the settlement boundary of Lymington on land already allocated in your local plan. It directly contributes to meeting the Council's pressing housing need at a time when the 5-year housing land supply stands at just 2.4 years. Importantly, the scheme delivers 15 affordable homes, meeting the local plan's 50% target. These are focused on 1- and 2-bedroom homes, including much-needed accommodation for over 55s, which helps to address demographic need while supporting the tranquility of the neighbouring hospice. The proposal includes 4 custom-build plots supporting self-builders and adding choice and variety to the local housing market, in line with the Council's duty under the Self-Build and Custom House Building Act. High-quality design underpins this scheme. With low densities, generous green space and mature tree retention, it respects the distinctive rural lanes character of the area. The layout delivers a safe, legible development that integrates seamlessly with its surroundings. Over 6,000 square metres of natural recreational green space will be created alongside children's play facilities and biodiversity net gain, helping to reduce recreational impacts on the New Forest protected habitats. Public access will be enhanced through the realignment and upgrade of the footpath linking Lower Pennington Lane and Ridgeway Lane, with a contribution towards off-site improvements also secured. The scheme delivers 6 dedicated parking spaces for use by Oakhaven Hospice, directly responding to site-specific policy requirements and supported by the hospice itself, as you will hear.
You have had well over your time, actually. Do you have a lot more to say? Because I need to hand over.
Yes, well, simply, Chairman, this is a policy-compliant, high-quality scheme on allocated land. It identifies, meets local needs, and we would respectively ask that you agree with your officer's recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Mr. Ryde, then. You have a minute.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Andrew Ryde. I'm the Chief Executive of Oakhaven Hospice. Oakhaven is happy to confirm we have no concerns with this application. Our concern in relation to all applications under SS6 has been protecting the long-term privacy, tranquility and safety for all our patients, visitors and staff. This was recognised by the local plan inspector and forms part of policy. We're grateful for the regular engagement from the applicant, listening to our concerns. The applicant has adjusted the scheme based on our concerns. We're grateful for that. Importantly, the applicant has agreed for the ownership of the land related to the additional parking to be transferred to us to ensure the long-term security of that parking, which is of great importance to us. We support the elements of this application that is restricted to 55+, as we believe this may help with ensuring tranquility for the hospice. We're grateful for the additional parking the applicant is transferring ownership to us. We believe the application to be a thoughtful and carefully planned application sits well with the role and function of the hospice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now come to Mr. Simon Potts. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Councillors, thank you for this opportunity to speak. This site, SS6, was allocated for housing development without consultation with the local highways authority. It was always unsuitable as a housing allocation because the lanes are narrow, lined with trees and verges, and cannot be widened to provide a full pedestrian pavement. So now the Highway Authority have the unenviable task of trying to make it work safely in highways terms, and to put it simply, they can't. Their demand is that the developer build out into Lower Pennington Lane, narrowing the carriageway and introducing curbs, additional signage and lighting. However, this will just take pedestrians a short distance further up the lane and deposit them at the top of the green triangle at the junction with Fox Pond Lane, at which point they will be stuck. From there, they will either have to negotiate a muddy track and gravel road west to the pavement in Elm Avenue and then up to Milford Road, which is a long detour in the opposite direction to where they will want to go, or they will have to walk in the carriageway up Fox Pond Lane or Lower Pennington Lane. Fox Pond Lane is quieter, but also much narrower than Lower Pennington Lane and already serves the substantial Kingston Park housing development, so traffic flows regularly. And of course, Lower Pennington Lane is busy. With these proposals, PALS and highways consultants remain concerned about the safety of existing and future lane users. For example, there is scant acknowledgement of the risk to the safety of residents and recreational users as a result of the increased traffic flow in Lower Pennington Lane, arising both from this development and the remainder of SS6. There does not appear to have been any road safety audit of the proposed off-site works. There appears to be no provision at all for cyclists and no connectivity to the rest of SS6. The traffic surveys supporting this application are now 7 years out of date and were carried out in December, when none of the high levels of recreational traffic the lanes carry through the summer months would have been apparent. And since then, traffic levels in the lane have increased substantially, particularly from Oakhaven Hospice. So to conclude, PALS seek to protect the rural character and environment of the lanes. The lanes are shared surfaces where pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles have to accommodate each other. There is no point in pretending otherwise. Therefore, we urge you to drop the requirement for this unnecessary pavement to nowhere and request that you defer this application, both to allow for up-to-date traffic surveys and to find a workable solution where pedestrians and cyclists can safely share the lanes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor England, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, councillors. The last time I was in this chamber was April of this year, when you refused the actual other application for SS6 land. and I thank you very much for your consideration for that. This is another way of opening up the floodgates. There are issues being raised in the officer's report of not having enough outside space. It has also been highlighted by the PALS group of their issue of highway safety, out of date. This is something that's going to be and should be really considered up to date, not 7 years out of date. And this is your duty as life changes. The rural lanes have been mentioned several times, and the word urbanisation has been used in the presentation. This is not what the rural lanes should be. Urbanisation is not for this area. This is also endorsed by the Town Council, and it's also endorsed on page in your document of all the representations that people made objections to this actually happening. And for the sake of 6 car parking spaces, I totally support Oakhaven, but this is possibly a sprat to catch a mackerel. This is something that really needs great depth and thought, and precluding what Lymington does need is to generate accommodation for young people. And by putting the 55 barrier on it, if it's not taken up, then maybe young people could get it. Well, that's not good enough, I'm afraid. Young people are the lifeblood of the town, and there are several elderly residential areas that have been given permission for development in Lymington. So I urge you to remember urbanisation is not suitable for the lanes, especially adjacent to the National Park. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. I now open up the floor to members to ask questions. Councillor Davies.
My first one is, why are we putting in a play area if we're limiting it to over 55s? I don't know if they have a particular need to use a play area.
We still have the 11 family houses and the self-build properties that will generate, in theory, will generate demand for play equipment for children. So the age restriction is for the 15 affordable units only, and as I described with the cascade provision that the council has just referred to, there will be opportunity for younger people to live there, albeit at 1 and 2 bedroom units. Numbers of children in those properties is highly likely to be low, but given the policy requirements and the other 15 properties that are likely to give rise to children, it's entirely appropriate.
I just feel like perhaps it's overkill if you've only got, maybe 11 families, possibly, households. My second question is on the transport. Yes, the transport assessment 2017, that's incredibly out of date. Is there a possibility of getting a more up-to-date transport assessment to judge the reality of the situation now? Because obviously we've had COVID, and in the post-COVID world, those lanes have got incredibly busy as people have discovered them during lockdown. So is there some way of getting an up-to-date transport assessment before approving? Because not only is it building out into the lanes, any local in Pennington will tell you those lanes are dangerous, and if you're going to drop people at Fox Pond Lane, the route up there is quite perilous. I've walked those routes quite.
Can I just have a question?
That's what I mean. Yeah. So I'm trying to ask in terms of the up-to-date transport assessment. Can one be a
Well, your colleagues, your officers, Hampshire County Council Highways officers, have expressed no concerns regarding the age of the assessments and surveys. They're supportive of the application on that matter, not raised any concerns regarding the capacity of the lanes to accommodate the vehicle movements that will be generated by this development. So on the basis of their comfort, their no objection, I see no reason that we would require the applicant to provide any further review of that or updated documents. I mean, they're familiar with the scenario of surveys having been undertaken in COVID times or before, and the potential consequences and changes in in the dynamics of vehicle movements and capacity issues. So they'll have assessed the information presented to us with that in mind in any event.
Thank you. I have got one more, but I'm happy to go to other councillors before. Yeah.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much. Two points I'd like to make out. I'm very disappointed in the fact that we're losing farmland, which would grow produce for people to eat. The more we build on these, the less we can feed our nation. And I think it's
Is there a question, Councillor Hawkins?
That is a statement, and my question is next. We should not restrict by age people buying houses or living in houses. There should be no age restriction because it's
Okay, that would be
undemocratic.
debate, not a question.
Thank you.
Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for an excellent presentation on the estate. And obviously you worked many hours together with the building companies to actually come up with this presentation. The only thing I've got concern with, all these new estates, we've got problems with little village and countryside lanes. Everywhere we go, we've got the same problem. But on page 13, on the highways objection, I just wanted to make sure that all the bullet points, because some of them you actually said you've actually looked at and resolved. The confirmation of delivery mechanism required to provide tactile paving, A337, has that been resolved?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's covered in the update, that the representation from Hampshire County Council reported in the actual report, as it was at the time, was an objection based on the failure of or the insufficient comfort that had been given by the applicant that those bullet-pointed issues would be resolved. The applicant has given clear indication that they're willing to make provision, deliver those elements, and they form part of the Section 106 obligations as part of the recommendation. So yes, the tactile crossing across Milford Road by the local centre and some provision along the road that goes up to the Pennington Cross Centre with some improvements for the crossing points there will also be delivered and secured by the Section 106.
Okay, thank you.
So if you see on the update sheet, the highways officers were willing to revise their conclusion and their recommendation to no objections subject to Section 106. The more positive aspect, having been given that confidence that the applicant was willing to undertake those measures.
So you're happy all these bullet points have been covered?
I am, yes, we are.
Thank you,
yeah.
thank you.
Councillor Woods.
Can I ask, are there any traffic calming proposals for Lower Pennington Lane? There's lots of complaints about speeding and obviously pedestrian access along the lane.
The works that have been discussed to provide footway pavement facilities in Lower Pennington Lane will include or incorporate an element of vehicles stopping, giving way to allow access through a pinch point where the carriageway is narrowed, that to allow pedestrians to cross between elements of the pavement that will be provided, and that will result in vehicles having to stop and wait if a vehicle is approaching from the opposite direction. So whilst not designed to be traffic calming for the purpose of traffic calming, it will have that impact effect in any event, whilst prioritising opportunities for pedestrians.
Can I ask what the speed limit will be?
Oh, there's no intention of introducing any further speed restrictions. I mean, I assume it's a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, but actually, from memory, looking at the speed surveys that were undertaken to explain the visibility display requirements, the actual average speed that was calculated and measured for calculating that was below 30 miles an hour in any event.
Councillor Riley.
I'd like to ask a question on the self-built housing. The aspect of the planning application seeking online planning permission is for the delivery of 4 plots to be made available for self-build and custom housing development. No detailed plans have been provided for these dwellings following future owners to make their individual observed matters how does that work?
So much like when we present an outline application to you in its totality, often it'll be we're talking about the principles, and very often it's only the access to the site that is being designed up in detail. It's exactly the same as that. At a point when those plots are purchased by a self-builder, they will present subsequent planning applications to us that provide those additional details of the proposed house they wish to build, and the conditions have been worded in such a manner to allow that to happen and capture that as part of the recommendation. But those conditions only apply to those 4 plots as outlined in blue and coloured on the other plan there, as opposed to the rest of the houses that we've got the full details for and will be free to implement once they've discharged the relevant conditions should you support the recommendation.
So when it says the suit of self-build wishes, how does that work?
Well, the government undertook to try and create this as a more dedicated form of housing quite a few years ago now, because of the desire for people to buy a plot of land and be able to build their own home rather than working with the market. And so councils are required to carry a register of people who have expressed an interest in building their own plot, and when these plots become available through the planning process, we have to make them available to those particular individuals. Those individuals can then design the homes as they see fit, as just like you would if you were trying to extend your property or replace your property. You'd work with an architect to design your property and submit it to the council for planning permission. So it would work in the same way as that.
Thank you.
Come back to Councillor Davies.
Thank you. In terms of the over 55s provision, you say you've got the figures for social housing need. Do you have the social housing, the home search register for Pennington, and do you have the proportion of those who are over 55?
From memory, I think it's 13, possibly 15% of applicants to the register in the Lymington-Pennington area are over the age of 55, and 13% across the entire district. So it's not an insignificant amount of people who are over that age who are looking or in need of affordable housing. And it's on that basis that it'd be hard to argue that it's not meeting, despite the restriction and it limiting, it's still meeting need, and that's what we're all about trying to provide for. I recognise that there is greater need at younger age groups, of course, below that age limit. However, there is still clear need that this would make provision for.
Are there any more questions?
But yeah, just on...
Are there any more questions from anyone else? Councillor Davies.
Thank you very much. It was just on the transport side of things then. So obviously if you're limiting the affordable housing to over 55s but not the other housing for some reason, why is... I don't see how an out-of-town or an edge of settlement, as it's called, location is suitable when those people perhaps will have greater difficulty in terms of walking and in terms of transport. Surely a town settlement would be better. I've in the past we've always tried to keep kind of, I'm not going to say older people.
You're making statements.
No,
again.
I'm trying to ask a question.
Well, we're not talking about care. So we're not retirement properties like the Churchills or McCarthy and Stones that we've discussed in this room, where they are looking at potentially much older age groups when you actually look at the average age of those sorts of properties. To be honest, the lion's share of this room will meet that category, I suspect. And I don't know any of your personal details, but in terms of being able to walk from there or access facilities on foot, we're not talking about those who are, as I say, in care or needing some form of sheltered accommodation like the McCarthy and Stone Churchill schemes, where they see that as an important part of reducing their parking requirements, as well as making them attractive to people who are in those more older age groups. that suit their profile of their product.
Thank you. One more question and then we'll go to debate.
I just want to ask about Oakhaven Hospice. There was quite a concern on the last time this application came here. Has that all been sorted out to the boundary and that there was a problem?
We have heard from the representative of Oakhaven Hospice.
And yeah.
Want to ask him again?
So the ownership issues along the buffer strip and the parking, no, it hasn't been resolved. I've had no contact from the applicant in relation to that application.
No, I think in this case it has been resolved.
Sorry,
and
in
you
this
are.
case the ownership is being transferred, but in the previous application it hasn't been resolved. This has, yes. Apologies.
We'll go. Another question?
Yeah, I was hoping to ask the developer, what's the environmental footprint of the housing with heat pumps and solar panels, that sort of stuff?
So, I mean, for example, the last development we did was when you look at your energy EPC type thing, it goes A through F and 100 down to a lot less. We were delivering there at 84, A84 without solar, and if people choose to put solar onto their roofs, we were getting up to sort of an A95, A96, and we'll be looking to provide a similar specification on this site.
So there'll be a high level of insulation, will there? And
yeah, look, I mean, we're believers in that. That's the way that construction should go. In fact, if you get the insulation right, on the last scheme we did, we even insulated the slabs so that there was nothing in contact with the ground that wasn't insulated. There's obviously a long way that you can go. Against that is what's cost effective. So you're trying to balance, thermal efficiency, energy efficiency, with the hard, commercial facts of life in terms of delivering.
and heat pumps, they're quite controversial these days, seem to be.
Heat pumps, I mean, for a lot of these types of development, if you get the insulation right, the heat demand actually can be quite low. And whilst the market would find that difficult, a lot of these properties could, if constructed correctly, function quite normally without a large heat demand. But you'd still need to put a heat pump probably, and that would be the preferable approach. And that works really well with a high level of insulation.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to debate. Does anybody have anything? Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, looking at the development and the amount of work that's gone into it and the amount of spaces we've got, I'd quite happily live on that site. I wish we had more developments come to us with this thought for open space, which usually isn't allowed us. And I'd quite happily live there. And the road seems to be a problem we've always got on these developments, but I'd happily accept it, and I propose we accept the planning.
Any more comments? Councillor Riley.
Yeah, I would like to echo that. I think it's a very nice development. It's got 50-50 affordable housing, and I would support it on that. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Davies.
I might surprise you by saying I cannot support this application. I think there are good aspects to it. The design isn't too bad, and I think I'm sure the development itself will look very nice. But we desperately need social housing for all ages in Pennington. This council's decision to limit the affordable housing to over 55s, but not the market housing, is elitist, ageist nonsense. I'm sorry, but are you seriously suggesting that working class people in their 20s, 30s, 40s are not wanted, but middle class people are perfectly fine? It's a disgraceful portrayal of working class people, and I'm really quite appalled that this council thinks that's acceptable.
Thank you. Any more comments, please? Does anybody else have anything to say? I do need a seconder. Oh, Councillor Riley, okay.
Just a comment. Yeah, I'm quite happy with the over 55 age restriction. I think there's plenty of demand for that age group, and actually, you know, people over 55 might prefer to live in a nice, quiet, close where they're not disturbed by young children or whatever. So I think that's perfectly reasonable, particularly in that situation next to the hospice. I'm still concerned about the effect on the lane for pedestrians and cyclists. I do acknowledge that a lot of thought has gone into cycle and pedestrian route for this particular development, but the development itself will increase the traffic on the lane for, you know, existing users. However, it's only 30 houses, so the extra traffic will be fairly minimal. So on balance, I think I'm happy with it.
Does anybody else have anything to say? In that case, we'll come back to the speakers. You have a minute to respond. Mr. Truitt, do you want to separate the minute or?
Chairman, I think I only really need to make one point, maybe just to allay some fears about this over 55s issue. Clearly, as applicants, we feel there is a need for over 55s, and it is still affordable housing. Class and age doesn't really come into it. I'm 57, and I think I could probably walk to Lymington from this site. I hope I could, anyway. But to make a more serious point, you know, in the 106, it is entirely within your justification to put a cascade mechanism into that, so that if those dwellings were not sold for some reason or not rented to people over 55 and there was a latent need, you can have a cascade mechanism. I used to be a housing enabling officer for another council, and that's quite common in Section 106 agreements. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Potts, you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I just want to clarify that the Highways Authority did request updated traffic surveys, and the main developer on the main part of SS6 just ignored it. So the Highways Authority do have concerns and are doing gymnastics in order to in order to make it, let's say, as safe as they can do. But I would emphasise it's the main gateway into the marshes for recreational users going down there, and there'll be a lot of traffic. This is very urbanising. It doesn't quite come out because you haven't got pictures, and we would look for a safer way where perhaps take it down to 20 miles an hour or something like that. So you wouldn't have to urbanise it, but you could get the traffic down.
That's another issue. Okay, we'll move on. Councillor England, you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. As one of the councillors stated, excuse me, about the rural policy, yeah, it's rural because you've been surrounded by ex-farmland, you've got the lanes, and you also have the national park. So you're not going to put a development in a built-up area. So that's why it's rural, and this is the reason why it shouldn't be removed, and it should be not allowed to go forward, because you're decimating the rural area that you're thinking so tranquil. So also vehicle sizes, I don't know, as ages, everyone has fatter cars now. So those lanes were made for tracks. They're not made for highway super transport, which will be coming. And if you look back to photos 1 to 4, you'll see how rural the area is. So also we need housing, but not to this density, and also giving somebody carte blanche to design their own self-build. It's really wonderful. And I wonder how many TV programmes will be done out of this. But
Councillor England, you have had your time. Thank you. Okay, so we come to the recommendation, which is to grant, subject to conditions, to the service manager. That has been proposed by Councillor Sleep and seconded by Councillor Riley. All of those in favour, please raise your hands. It's 9 to grant. So that's been granted. Thank you. Hill Farm, Mill End, Dameron, and this is application 25/10. Dameron, okay. Sound like an Aussie. Application number 25/10281. Thank you. We don't have any speakers on this one. We'll go straight over to the presentation then. So to Jessica, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application at Hill Farm in Dameron. It's for a unrestricted use of a existing holiday let to a C3 dwelling house. This is the red line plan, so it just shows the building here with the associated driveway and parking at the front and garden to the rear. This is a location plan, so it's outside of the settlement boundary and it's within the countryside. And an aerial photograph showing the barn. So the dwelling is this part of the barn and the remainder of the barn is within agricultural use. This is the site plan, so it remains to be unchanged from the existing situation. The vehicle parking is to the sort of rear of the dwelling, really. The dwelling is, the holiday let is accessed from this side of the building. These are the elevations, so there's no external alterations or internal alterations. The building would be exactly as it is now. And these are the ground floor plans and the first floor plans. So the building, the holiday let, the dwelling would have an appropriate level of amenity, and there are no concerns with impacts on residential amenity. These are the site photographs, so this shows the access to the building, and this is taken from the rear, which is sort of essentially the front of the house. And these are the pictures of what would be the garden. And that's the recommendation is to grant subject to conditions. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you. Questions, please. Councillor Harman.
Yeah, would this be an additional dwelling on our figures?
Yes, it would be.
Didn't hear that.
Sorry, yes, it would be. It would be.
Any more questions? Councillor Davies.
I was just going to move us to the recommendation and say I'd happily propose it.
Does anybody wish to second that? Councillor Dowd? Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Sleep?
Yes, thank you, Chair. On the page 79 of the report, we're actually looking at the let is not seasonal. There's little material difference, so I can't honestly see any concern about this at all. So thank you.
In that case, we'll go straight to the vote. So the recommendation is to grant. That's been proposed by Councillor Davies and seconded by Councillor Dowd. We'll go to the electronic vote now, please. And that's unanimous. That's been granted. Thank you. Okay, we'll continue with the next application, which is on page 85 of your agenda. This is 25/10365, the Chapel, Lower Duggons Lane, South End, Dameron. We have one speaker, Mr. William Ferguson. You will have 3 minutes. Okay, so we'll go ahead with the presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. So this is the planning application for the chapel at Lower Duggons Lane, Dameron. The recommendation is to refuse. The reason it's at committee is there's a contrary view with Dameron Parish Council. So this is the red line plan. So as you can see, the chapel is set back from the road, so it's got a long access drive, and the red line is around the buildings and the garden. And this is the general location, the context plan. Dameron is sort of characteristically is the properties front the road, whereas this property is behind other properties, so it does form part of the wider landscape of Dameron. This is a constraint sheet, so you can see again the red line shows the site. We've got protected trees on the site just forward. It's in the conservation area. The old cottage to the front of it is listed, and it's also within the national landscape. So it's quite a sensitive site and in the Dameron conservation area. And this is the aerial photograph yet again, so you can just see the site outlined. It's surrounded by fields, so it's in a lovely setting. Okay, so this is the block plan. So the proposal is for a single-storey rear extension, which is identified as an orangery on the application, and I've used that term throughout the report. So this is the original chapel, which was a redundant chapel, which was brought back into use as a dwelling by the applicants. In 2017, they had consent for that. There were some single-storey additions on the back of it, which you'll see in the photographs to come, and there's been a subsequent side extension to the property. So this is the existing and the proposed elevations. So we have the original chapel, as you can see, on the existing northwest elevation, if we work off that to begin with. So you've got the original chapel, which has been very sensitively converted into living accommodation with rear extension, and then this modern, as you can see on the southwest elevation, we've got a subsequent two-storey extension which was added, I think it was post 2021. So obviously you can see the proposed extension on the right hand side. So the orangery, it will add further to the linear form of the building. So we've already got, it's just further elongating it, and in the officer's view is this further diminishes the significance and the form of the original chapel. So this is the roof plan, which is quite useful because it shows, as you can see, it's got a lantern, but the rest of the roof is solid. You just bear that in mind, because when we go on to the existing and proposed, you can see it's glazed on two sides. One part of the reason for refusal is that it doesn't comply with policy DM20, which is the countryside policy. Now, there's like two parts to that, really. We've got the design side, which obviously we have concerns about that it doesn't comply with, but there's also the quantitative element. For properties in the countryside, there is a 30% restriction. Sometimes there is some flexibility applied to this. So when the property was first converted, it was what you can see as the sitting room, utility snug, and the kitchen and dining room. They formed the original part of the dwelling. We have only got the ground floor plans. The first floor plans have 2 bedrooms in them now. And so currently it is a 3 to 4 bedroom property. And the reason I say 3 to 4, because the ground floor bedroom can also be used as a study depending on the requirements for the applicants. So it's now a 3 to 4 bedroom property. So this 2-storey extension was added, and they now want to add the orangery. Well, a term of an orangery, it does suggest a conservatory, and the policy does allow flexibility for conservatories within policy DM20 because they're considered lightweight. But for it to meet the criteria of a conservatory, the roof has to be 75% glazed and the walls have to be 50% glazed. Now, I've worked out that the walls are 50% glazed. I appreciate there's one solid wall here, but taking into account all the free walls, more than 50% are glazed, but the roof isn't 75% glazed. So, therefore, it also fails the quantitative element of the policy. Now, I've put this slide in because we had a previous application for a conservatory, which we refused. It was refused under delegated powers. There was no trigger to take it to committee, as Dameron Parish Council actually recommended that for Par 4 refusal, whereas now they've done a Par 3 approval. So you can see the comparisons between the two structures. Obviously, this is lower, but it's still felt that it's all the conflicting roof forms, which you can probably see from here, does raise concerns with the form of the addition. And these are, again, further comparison between the schemes. This one, also, the walls are pulled in and it has been reduced in length. Before it was 4.1, now it's 4 metres. And before the width was 6.2 and now it's 5.7. So they have made some reductions to the overall scheme. This slide is quite useful because it actually just shows how the buildings transitioned over the years. So the first picture shows the 2017 image before it was converted. So you can see it had the single-storey rear additions which had been added to the chapel before, and they've been incorporated, as you can see from the 2021 picture, they've been incorporated into the conversion. And then 2024, that shows the 2-storey side extension that was subsequently approved. And this is a picture of the chapel, as you can see. So it's really, you know, this is felt it's a non-designated heritage asset in the conservation area in the national landscape. So it's in a very sensitive area. It's you can still read it, but if you keep having additions, as I said, you're going to be further eroding the form and the significance of the building. And I appreciate it's not public, it's not visible from public vantage points, but it is in the conservation area, and that isn't a test. So obviously the test is, you know, whether it's be harmful to the character and the significance of the building, which in this case we've taken the view it is. This is useful because this is a 3D view submitted by the agent, so you can actually see it in 3D with the addition. And as I said, reason for refusal is by reason of its design, scale and siting on the building. The proposed orangery would significantly contrast with the vernacular of the existing chapel, further eroding the architectural character of the host building and resulting in a harmful and uncohesive addition. And therefore it's felt it would be harmful to the significance of the non-designated heritage asset and fail to preserve the character and appearance of the Dameron conservation area. And furthermore, the inappropriate addition would detract from the visual beauty of the national landscape. With regards to the national landscape, obviously we've got the dark skies, and there have been measures suggested that would mitigate the harm in the use of a blind in the roof and particular type of glazing which reduces the light transmission. However, even though it wouldn't stand as a refusal on its own grounds, it is considered still contributes. There would be more glazing on the within the walls that would emanate. And also the property is a viable 4-bedroom property, and we don't feel there's justification. There would be no harm in our opinion, that it could no longer be used if this wasn't allowed. And I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Ferguson, you have 3 minutes.
Kate, thank you for acknowledging the efforts that my wife and I have made to tone down the first plan. We're listening to the plan that we've got to today, and we have taken all your points on board, which I'm going to run through in a moment. The one thing right at the beginning of your talk, did you say we hadn't got parish council planning permission at the beginning? Because I think we do.
No, sorry, just to clarify, what I said was the previous refusal, the Dalmarnock Parish Council objected.
Yeah.
The reason it's at committee today is because they've now supported this current proposal. Hope that clarifies that. Thank you.
I was a bit unclear. So what we originally wanted to do was put on a porch, and the porch was gonna, we took some advice from a local architect and planning consultant, and we thought the porch would have a much more detrimental impacts on the original simple classical chapel building. It would have been on that same side, and we were talked out of it, and actually I entirely agree with that. I'm pleased. And we were advised, because what we're really after is a boot room, is to build on where the chapel had already been built upon, not by us. There was an office behind the chapel, which was the lean-to, which this extension would sit just below, not above. And when you walk in, which in one of the pictures it was just the concrete loo blocks, it's now you walk in straight into a kind of dining area. And what we want to do is just make what's already there into a boot room, and then just sort of push the kitchen out. So the kitchen comes out into that new orangery conservatory. I'll leave that up to you. I don't quite know what it would be classified as. But we have reduced the original plans, which you kindly acknowledged. We've made it smaller. It sits below the lean-to now. It sits just below the lean-to. There's significantly less glass. It's no longer a sort of Georgian style with a painted finish, but we've changed it to unseasoned natural oak in keeping with the rest of the house and a lot of the village. You also acknowledge that it's smaller from the side, so it now sits inset from the sides of the lean-to extension. And you know, when I moved to that chapel, I was just me and my wife and daughter. I think things have moved along a bit, and if we could just walk into a boot room that was already there within the frame of the chapel, and then just push out with this extension, so the kitchen goes there, we can sit out there, it would just make life much easier. And I really do feel like we've been listening and trying to take on board everything that has been said. And I think that's me done for now. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Members, questions, please. Councillor David.
Yes, sorry, I'm kind of on something that Mr. Ferguson's just said there about the kitchen being moved out into that. Isn't that an extension rather than a conservatory? Could you explain a bit more to me? Because I'm just concerned on that.
Sorry, so on this plan I've got up, the proposed floor plans, you can see this is the extension that's currently being applied for. The study bedroom 4 was the extension in 2021. The rest of the building is as was there in 2017. Obviously you had the historic chapel, which was a non-conformist chapel. Obviously the additions, if I just go to the photograph I showed you, that one, so this is how it looked before it was converted. So these were obviously more modern additions, but they were there as part of the building before it was converted. So does that answer your question? Sorry.
So the applicant's just said that he was hoping to move the kitchen out into that area.
Well, not the kitchen as such, but
Okay.
just so where you can sit. So like
Okay, so he wants to make it a dining area.
Kitchen in it, it's just so
Okay.
where the dining table is now would be sort of full of essentially a booth room.
Okay.
And
Sorry, that's what I was just getting that clarification. Sorry, so could the officers clarify the rules on that? On the actual, because if it's saying they want to, I can, that just confused me a little bit in terms of, I thought a conservatory was supposed to be self-contained, it's supposed to be.
Sorry. Well, obviously the application is as submitted, and we have to consider it. They've described it as an orangery. As I was saying, that's quite important for the policies of DM20 with regards to the quantitative element, because you can, there's obviously it has to be appropriate in design as well, but in the countryside, normally the policy allows for extensions up to 30% of the original floor space. So when we're looking at the, let's just get back onto the floor plans for you. So if you look at the existing floor plans, so the original floor space would be the chapel at first ground and first floor. We haven't got the first floor plans here because they weren't deemed necessary to include in the presentation. And the kitchen and the dining room were all there prior to 1982, as far as we knew, and it came into use as a dwelling in post-2017. So all of that is the original floor space. We're the study, where you see study bedroom 4, that is a 2-storey extension. So obviously that floor space counts against. And with the addition of the conservatory, well, the extension, that I think I've put it in my report, that this has increased the percentage. Yes, if you have a look at paragraph 10.3.4, the cumulative additions will take it to 40% over, so it's, they can only go up to 30, so another 10% over. And because it doesn't meet the criteria of a conservatory as per the policy, in the footnote, it gives you a description as to what we consider a conservatory for the purposes of the policy. Therefore, it hasn't got the flexibility, because if you're adding a conservatory, that's added into the mix. Does that explain? Thank you.
Councillor Dowd?
Yeah, this is quite tricky, isn't it? Because, as you say, had it been a conservatory with the glazing that entails, there is the flexibility allowed. But it's in deference to the fact that you've got a dark sky area that the amount of glazing has been reduced to make it more suitable for the environment, and that's kind of put it between two stalls. Architecturally, it's an addition to the more modern bits, so I don't see it as an issue for the chapel part of the building at all. In many ways, I think it looks like a sensitive addition to that. I don't see it jarring with that. But the problem I have is, are we not allowed to give the flexibility of the size because of that, the issue of the glazing in the roof? Or are we still allowed to give a bit of leeway on that one because of the issue of the dark skies and the mitigation for that?
Chairman, members, good morning. Maybe I can try and help. Your case officer a moment ago took you to paragraph 10.3.3 of our report on page 89. I think if you read on a couple of paragraphs, in terms of picking up on Councillor Dow's question, 10.3.5 is quite important. So where, notwithstanding the fact that the proposal fails the quantitative test, in all cases we need to look at the design and whether that meets your other policies and meets character and appearance of the area. So I think you need to look at your development plan as a whole, look at your policies as a whole. In this case, you have to be alive to the dark skies constraint, and the case officer in her introduction talked about there's detail in the application in terms of how that can be mitigated through glazing specifications. I think what I'd like to take you to, though, is when you're looking at the character of the building, you also need to think about the fact that this building is set within the conservation area. So you have a test, a duty, statutory duty, to make sure you preserve the character of that conservation area. My question to you as a decision maker is to make sure that you take that duty into account when you consider the application and when you debate the application, and also be mindful of the planning history. We've heard about how things have been reduced, how things have been tailored and amended, but you have the dimensions and the changes set out in your report. That's on page 88 at 10.1.5. And if you go back a page, you'll see you also have, and the case officer's taken you through, the comparison plans, the reason for refusal from 2024. Specific reference there made to failing to preserve the character of the conservation area. So your judgment needs to be, are the changes enough to deal with that reason for refusal, I would suggest, making sure you apply the test for a conservation area.
Can I come back on that? I mean, in terms of the judgment part of it, in terms of the building, because it's not actually attached to the chapel, I'm quite happy with that. It's simply the glazing part that I'm not fully clear about whether or not I can allow for the fact, because of the dark skies issue, that the mitigation has resulted in it falling foul of the conservatory ruling. That's the bit I'm struggling with. In terms of the architectural impact.
We're kind of going into debate a bit now. You've asked the question and had the answer.
I want a clear answer on the, do we still have an element of flexibility in the glazing issue, or is that absolutely, that's the way we are?
It's within your gift as a committee to come to a different view to the recommendation. The reason for refusal makes reference to the international dark skies as a result of the assessment of the application and the extent of glazing and the roof lantern, as your case officer has taken you to. If you come to a different view, that's entirely within your gift as a decision maker. You've heard that there is some detail within the application about glazing specification. We can explore that if we get to the point where the recommendation maybe is more favourable and we're thinking about planning conditions, but it's entirely within your gift, I would suggest.
Thank you.
Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question right back to the beginning I'd like to ask the case officer. The first conservatory was turned down, and I think we would have probably turned it down as well at the time. The roof line is exactly the same. We've changed the name to an orangery, and it's a conservatory slightly smaller. So would the owner actually come to you to actually try and get this alteration done by changing a name? I mean, you're sat at the desk saying it's still a conservatory. I just wondered if there's a lot of work gone into this development, and I appreciate he wants to develop his property, and I understand that completely. But was the debate to you before we got this far? Because it seems we've got exactly the same thing, only smaller.
They did do pre-app, but between the two, a slightly different scheme. I think it took away the roof lantern completely. I did have a look at it before the meeting. Unfortunately, we didn't feel that would work, and I think it's, when you look at it from the side, you're introducing another roof form, and it just feels that it's all a bit uncohesive. Unfortunately, I'm not sure how you would extend this property further in that location, whether there is scope still to extend it. It is a little bit limited by this really steep mono-pitched addition that has been very sensitively incorporated. You can't argue that the applicants haven't done a lovely job of what's there already. So obviously they're very committed to the property. However, in this case, I just don't know if anything would work there, in my opinion. But they did do pre-app.
Thank you.
Any more questions? In that case, we're going to debate. Councillor Sleep.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say it's commendable the amount of work that's been done on this chapel, and it's not the first one I've been involved with. And there's a lot of love that goes into it when you take this building on. I just think, despite the family's development, and obviously they want to improve, carry on as much as they can, the council were obviously in debate about it. They didn't get a full result. I think it's one step too far, and I wouldn't want to support that. So I suggest that we actually support the refusal.
Councillor Woods.
I also applaud what the owner's done to this chapel. It's much improved, but it does concern me when the royal recommendation is 30%. It's already gone to 40%, and I sit on, or I'm aware of many parish councillors who would just refuse this out of hat because it was beyond the 30%. So my concern is that it's sort of possibly one step too far. So I'm happy to second the motion.
Does anybody else have anything to say? In that case, we'll come back to the applicant. You have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you very much. It's been very interesting to listen to your opinions. And if we're not granted planning today, I will take on board everything you've said. For sure I'll be disappointed. Regarding policy, and I have nothing else to say. I think Kate gave a very honest and fair summary of what we're trying to do. I don't actually have anything else to say. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In that case, we'll go to the vote. The recommendation is to refuse. That has been proposed by Councillor Sleep and seconded by Councillor Wood. We'll go to the electronic vote. Thank you.
Members, if you've pressed a button that isn't in line with your view, you can press again to actually correct that to your view. The vote is to refuse, as the chairman said, and your options are to vote in favour of refusal, against refusal, or to abstain. Thank you.
25 of the agenda, North End Farmhouse, North End Lane, Harbridge Green. Application number 25/10444. We don't have any speakers. We do have a comment from Councillor John Hayward, who couldn't make it.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor John Hayward has this morning submitted his apologies, though he wished to reiterate the comments made by Ellingham, Harbridge and Ypsileigh Parish Council, which are on page 96 of your agenda papers, as he and the Parish Council feel strongly about the matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll go ahead with the presentation then. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. Today I will be speaking about North End Farmhouse, North End Lane, Harbridge Green. You can see by this aerial photograph the property. I can't, the cursor. Yeah, so this property is a large farmhouse, and it would have been one day's time the main farmhouse for all the surrounding land and this farmyard. There is also, to note, there is a footpath that runs along this elevation here. That's in slightly more detail. This is the block plan, which it's the replacement of all of the windows, so it's nothing really to see there. So this is the front elevation, which faces the road. And you can see here that this is a Grade 2 listed building, and it's a lovely looking building with strong features like the chimneys, the gable, and the windows which are there are historic and rather attractive. They contribute to the building itself. This is the elevation that faces the footpath, so it's highly visible as well. And this is, again, a really attractive building with historic windows and a lovely little porch. You can see that the windows are such a large feature on these elevations, and they are historic. This is the rear elevation. Again, you've got the historic window here. These patio doors are modern interventions, 1970s, and this is an oak frame conservatory which gained consent, I think it was last year. So, and you can see the difference in the windows, actually. You can see the difference that these 70s interventions make in comparison with the originals. These are floor plans. Again, there's no change, but it's just to show you how many windows this is going to be lost. And that's the first floor plan. Again, you can see how many windows there are. This is an example. There are 23 windows and doors, so for ease, I've just picked one design of the casement. So you've got stick-on glazing bars. It clearly states that these aren't slimline. They're 24, and some of them are 28 mil in width. And they, like I said, they're stick-on. We've got plastic trickle vents up here, which are not traditional, and the widths of the wood. So when you look at the actual listed building, if these were to be put in, the windows would really change in their dimensions, the profiles of the wood. This is a sash window. These have got springs instead of weights. Again, the stick-on glazing bars, and the profiles are wider. And this is an example of an Anglian window, which would be acceptable in a modern house, but when you're talking Grade 2 listed, this is their heritage product. It's not a comparison. You've got the straight edge at the top, whereas we've got the arched header here, And again, the width of the wood and the glazing bars is quite a significant change. And like I say, these are just stuck on, they're not integral. And this is a design of the sash. Again, you can see the absolute difference in the makeup of these. So these windows, there's been no justification as to why these are considered to be in disrepair. There's no pre-app and no justification, and there's nothing to say that they can't have secondary glazing or draft proofing or other insulation or solar panels and air source heat pumps that would help with the eco status of the building. I've also Historic England have produced a book adapting historic buildings for energy and carbon efficiency, and they've noticed and understand that there is a need for change on some, but you would have to provide justification for replacing historic windows with modern, and always they say that it should be slimline and integral glazing bars, but at this point we don't have any justification that these are rotten or in disrepair. I did formally discuss these patio doors with justification at some point in the future. With a different application, we might be able to understand that these could be replaced, but the replacements that are on offer here today are not considered acceptable. So therefore, I recommend refusal.
Thank you very much. Questions, please. Nobody has any questions. So we'll go into debate. Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. This is an ongoing situation we've had historically. I'm thinking of the Isle of Wight, the Royal Yacht Squadron, and all their windows, and they were told to take them out again. When we look at these period properties, they look fabulous as they are, and I understand the concern about rot on window ledges, but if our officers have looked at them and said they're in good condition, I would just like to make the point that somewhere like Painbury, where the King has built this lovely area and built sash windows and things in, when you walk up and look at those, the curing of the wood is so ridiculous to what it used to be when they used to leave this timber for years before they used it. They've fallen apart in the last 10 years, I think, or less than that probably. You could put your hand through the timber. So basically, if these timber frames are still in good condition, which I would expect because they've been well seasoned, I can't see any reason why anyone wouldn't want to put just slide sheeting behind that you can actually increase the double glazing. The walls are going to be that deep to do it. I see no reason why we should change these at all. I think it's lovely as it is, and I would hate to see it be altered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
I would like to say that that building is unique with those windows, and if it was changed, it would change that building completely. It looks absolutely beautiful, and as far as the rot is concerned, I think that the owners, that is up to them, that they should look out to it. I recommend that we support this application.
Did you propose?
Oh,
you didn't
yes.
propose. You
I will propose that we refuse it.
Who got in first? You're proposing, and are you seconding then? Are you?
Yeah, as it is.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
second. Yeah, okay. Councillor Davis.
I was just going to move us along to say that I supported refusal and agreed with Councillor Sleep.
Does anybody else have anything to say? In that case, we'll go to the vote.
Thank you. Just for clarification, there were 10 votes cast there because Barry Rickman did withdraw from the meeting for that item. So everyone did cast a vote and it was unanimous in favour of refusal. Thank you.
Last application, which is a TPO. This is on page 103 of your agenda. Land at rear of 28 May Avenue, Pennington, Lymington. One holly and one sycamore.
Sorry, definitely not Pennington. It's deeper in Lymington.
It is Lymington. Sorry. We have Nicola Michel, is it? Michel, here to support, and you will be given 3 minutes to speak. So first of all, we go over to the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody, members and public attendees. We are bringing TPO 000225 before the committee today for a decision on whether to confirm the order. The order concerns a holly tree, T1, and sycamore tree, T2, locating on land to the rear of 28 May Avenue, Lymington. I appreciate the Pennington comment, actually, because I don't know why that was titled Pennington. So the red line plan shows the site sits to the western extent of May Avenue, and the site is located in the lower Buckland area of Lymington. You can see on the context plan. And the aerial image gives you an indication of the green space and tree cover near and around and within the site. Also, the rear of the site is also identified in the character area 2 of the Lymington Local Distinctiveness Supplementary Planning Document as an area of important trees, tree groups, which you can see that's highlighted with the red circle there. A number of TPOs in the locality situated within rear to the adjacent properties. The order was made in relation to an outline planning application for the demolition of the existing building and construction of 4 dwellings. An arboricultural impact assessment, which includes a tree survey and tree constraints plan, was submitted with the application detailing the trees present on the site. As you can see on the tree constraints plan, there's the holly to the north and the sycamore located in the southern corner. The site having been cleared of other trees prior to the submission of the planning application. You can see a number of significant stumps there were recorded on the tree constraints plan. There's the proposed dwellings there on the block plan would result in the loss of the remaining 2 trees. And the reasons given for the removal of the trees was due to their dominance in relation to the proposed layout. So public amenity street scene photographs. You can see the view of the property from May Avenue. Left image taken prior to leaf burst. You've got the sycamore tree to the left there. A holly tree sits to the right of the property. And viewed individually, you've got the holly there on the left image on the bank, and the sycamore there to the left-hand side of the property. This is the view within the site. You've got the holly tree there situated up on the bank near the top boundary, and the sycamore left on the bank, obviously out of leaf and then in leaf. The right-hand image taken in June. This is the view within the site of the rear of the site. You can see the gap in the former tree line where the stumps are situated. excuse me, and the image on the right shows the view from Tyler's Close Garages, where you've got the sycamore tree sat in between, in the middle there. So we raised an objection to the planning application on tree grounds, as we felt that a revised layout could accommodate the existing trees. They have a significant remaining contribution, which was indicated in the submitted tree survey and arboricultural impact assessment, and their removal was not necessary to facilitate a scheme. It's worth pointing out before the order was made that we consulted with the planning case officer on the overall feasibility of the scheme, irrespective of the presence of the trees. The case officer indicated there were other factors concerning the proposal which were likely to result in a refusal. Therefore, the likelihood of a revised scheme being considered was evident, and the trees alone were not going to be, in our view, a significant inhibiting constraint on a development. The developer has since submitted a revised layout. Sorry, I'll go back to that. That's a revised layout with the trees retained and with a supporting arboricultural impact assessment and tree protection plan, with the tree protection measures implemented that would ensure the retention of the trees. The developer has accepted the TPO for the sycamore tree in principle, but maintains an objection for the holly, and the property owner of the site maintains an objection to the TPO. In conclusion, the trees, in our view, provide a positive contribution to the area. Their loss would further diminish the presence and amenity provided by the important trees and tree group, as indicated in the SPD. They could be retained with a revised development layout, subject to planning approval, and therefore the recommendation is to confirm the order in the interest of public amenity. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicola Michel, you have 3 minutes to speak.
On behalf of my neighbours and myself, the owners of the properties in Tyler's Close that overlook May Avenue, we support the TPO. The trees enhance this urban area, providing greenery, screening, biodiversity, reducing stormwater runoff, and preventing subsidence by stabilising the bank at the back of 28 May Avenue. These are just a few of the benefits. These mature trees are important to retain and not easily replaced once removed. We therefore believe these trees should be retained.
Thank you very much. Questions, please. Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. So, just going back to the tree specialist, T1, the holly, are you happy, I know you've already said it, but you're happy from your development, changing the design structure gives us enough root clearance on future years for that holly against this repositioned hazing?
Yes, I think with the new arboricultural impact assessment and tree protection plan, the root protection area has been modified because it sits high on a bank. I'm happy that the information provided would ensure the protection of the tree through development.
And one more, if I may. Were you aware of the 4 stumps, the trees going out and leaving that open window before this actually came through to your attention?
No, we weren't aware of the previous site clearance. The first time I visited the site was in relation to the planning application when we were consulted, because there was a tree report supplied.
Councillor Woods.
Can I ask what the distance will be from the nearest proposed properties?
Chairman, can I come in and perhaps help with that question? I think it's really important we don't get caught up in the merits of the case. The planning application is quite separate. That's being dealt with by the case officer, and we'll look at the impact of property separation to trees. Your role today is looking at the amenity value of these trees and whether it's something we confirm the order on or not. You're not getting involved in the merits of the planning case.
Right, thank you.
Are there any more questions? Debate. Councillor Davies.
Yeah, I see no reason why we shouldn't keep protecting these trees. They are part of a local asset in terms of the SPD. I propose that we keep them.
Councillor Dowd.
Happy to second that.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Woods?
Well, with what happened at Sycamore Gap, I'd be pleased to save a sycamore.
Okay. Nicola, do you have anything more to say? Okay. In that case, we'll go to the vote. So the recommendation is to confirm the tree preservation order. Please, can you go to the vote? Thank you. And that's unanimous. Thank you. That's been confirmed. Thank you. That brings us to the end.